Good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing well and having a great day. Excited about the EAMC virtual conference kickoff. So thanks for joining us as we discuss how to diversify our organization. And let me welcome and introduce you to someone I have the honor to work with, Ann Jackson, our Chief People and Cultural Officer from OPU Group. Hi, Ann.
Yes. Hi, Marissa. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. I'm
That's
happy to
great.
be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, thanks again for taking the time to share your knowledge, insight, and experience on this topic. Let me just take a minute and brag about you before we dive in. But as I said, Anne is OPU Group's Chief People and Culture Officer. She joined the company at the beginning of the year with us and has been diligently working to build an amazing team that's going to help OVG grow, develop, and create our culture. So with that, Anne has an extensive background leading HR functions globally. Prior to OVG, she was a VP of Human Resources for Charter Communications. And then prior to that, Anne was with MSG for 16 years, growing through various ranks and positions in HR roles. So needless to say, Anne brings a wealth of knowledge to this topic. So I'm ready to learn more, get some insight on how, you plan on helping us grow, and then just provide insight to the group and the team that is listening and participating. So, and I think this is a really timely conversation as events are coming back online, as venues are rehiring and rebuilding their teams. Many of us are in the process of going through that hiring process. So I thought this conversation couldn't come at a better time. So if you're ready to jump in,
I'm ready, Marissa. I'm ready to jump in.
So as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what does that mean to you, and why is it important?
Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion has become the big thing in the environment that we're in now. But it's been something that's been important for many years prior to 2020 and all that's going on. And really, there's three separate things: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Three separate concepts, I guess you'd say, that form that synergy within an organization. So if we look at like diversity, I would say that's that principle of attracting and identifying and engaging people with varying backgrounds, right? That could be racial, it could be gender, ethnic, cultural. That's the diversity of political affiliation, thought, experiential backgrounds. Whereas equity is more of a identifying and righting the wrong, so to speak, I'll call them marginalized, but I don't mean in a negative connotation. I mean the ones that aren't the main voice in the room. Okay. And then inclusion, to build on that, that's why they always come with diversity, equity, and inclusion, because they all are interconnected. Inclusion is more of making sure that those marginalized voices are heard. Like, we tend to always hear the majority, whatever that majority might be. If it's an organization that is, white male, those are the voices that you'll hear most in what's going on in the direction. Whereas it doesn't mean that the other voices you don't hear, but you might not hear them as, let's call it, as loudly. So inclusion ensures that you hear that. You hear all those voices. And there's different ways that organizations are working on the inclusion factor. And I kind of feel that inclusion is the most important, if you had to say important, I guess, because you can diversify your organization, but if you don't make them feel inclusive, they're going to leave, whether they leave by choice or they leave because they're not being successful in the role. And so here at OVG, what we're working on, we're just rolling out, they're called employee resource groups, which is opportunities for employees, those voices that aren't heard as frequently as other voices, to really get out there and be the advocate for themselves, whether it's a woman's ERG or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ plus organizations. There's so many, so yes. Those are the ones where they come together, and it's really employee driven to, help the organization see how it can be so much more inclusive. So I think that's what kind of gets us together and everyone hears it. And that's the DEI. A colleague of mine shared with me a McKinsey study recently that said, organizations that have diversity of gender of 25% or more are more likely to be profitable than their peers. And also those, I'm just kind of reading the facts and trying to remember them. Also, organizations that have with an ethnicity diversity of 36% or more are also more likely to be profitable. So, you know, in every organization, how something affects your bottom line can help give it validity and support from all levels. So I think seeing those percentages shows that DE&I is really an important aspect to the organization, and it does absolutely affect the bottom line.
100%. I mean, I've been reading different case studies and blogs and websites on these details. And some of the other benefits they throw is a variety of perspective that lead to increased creativity, more innovation, obviously more profits and increased profits, higher employee. And I mean, and these are, you know, the more employee focused things, but you have higher employee engagement. There's less, you know, reduced turnover. So there's so many statistics out there talking about the, you know, why. I mean, we all, it's extremely important, but it's, you know, it's nice to hear the other aspects of why it's important, again, but to that bottom line. So that kind of brings me then into my next question is how do you advocate for diversity and inclusion with colleagues that don't really understand its importance? Like, there's so many statistics, like we could give you stories and case studies, but like, obviously there needs to be that advocacy too. So.
And that's a tough one, you know, because it does need to be that. And, you know, people are always, you know, always eager to say, I always look for diversity, but it's ultimately, I want, you know, the best person for that job or that project or whatever it might be. And, you know, you kind of have to dig deeper and you have to kind of ask like, okay, well, what are you looking for? What are the skills of that successful person for that role or for that project or whatever? And then, you know, while they share that information, you know, you'll ask them, okay, so when you're looking for these people with these skills, where are you looking? And, you know, and you kind of have to build blocks on it, right? Because to really be successful in the DEI space as an organization, it has to be intentional. And so as they, you know, as you ask the questions and you build the blocks, you point out to them, it's like, okay, that's great. You understand that your team, look at the makeup of your team. It's not a diverse team, yet you've been able to share with me all the things that you're looking for and how to get them, but you haven't intentionally made sure that you can make it a diverse environment. Or even on your team and you're doing projects, you haven't, you know, made it so that's inclusive to every member of your team. You know, so I think that those are the conversations that you have to keep having. And if a colleague is really open to wanting to be successful in this space, they'll hear you. You know, you're going to get those that are like, yeah, but, and those are the ones you have to work real hard, a little bit harder on. It's like, I kind of look at it as like a drop of water. You just keep going like this. It eventually breaks it down, you know,
It does.
Just keep going. And you know, I always tell my very small HR team right now, I'm like, just keep going. It's like, they'll hear you. Eventually we might not get it, but if we keep sharing and letting them know the importance, not only just for the organization, but for their, you know, their team and the richness they'll offer it, they'll get it and they'll understand it's like, let's do this with intention. So those are the type of conversations that we keep having. And it's always an easier conversation with people that are open to it. And then, you know, the ones that are a little more closed, we just keep working at it.
Yeah, and I think once you find that hot button, whatever that person's hot button of a situation is, that tends to kind of turn it on its ear too. So like you said, it's like drip of water. Something's gonna stick. Something's gonna hit and make them respond and flip their switch. So you know, it was funny as I was going through all of this, I found a really simple analogy about, you know, comparing creating a diverse and inclusive space to putting together a choir. It's like you need all the pieces of a choir. You need the musical backgrounds, the voice ranges, the different abilities to create that harmony. And, you know, it's kind of the same thing in building that culture within a company. You need all the pieces. You need the cultural differences, the race differences, you need the socioeconomic differences. So, I mean, it's
all of those. And it's so, you know, and it's so easy for us to just feel comfortable and think that we're you know, we'll call it open-minded or whatever you want to call it. But it's just a natural human thing that we're very comfortable being around people and working with people that are like us, whatever that like us might be. So we don't even realize it until, you know, someone brings it to your attention or you actively try and educate yourself. So it's very similar, right, to, as you said, building a choir. It's like, you know, the pieces you need. Now make sure you go out there and actively get those right pieces to get the end result that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And it'll take time, but I think,
Mhm.
any company that has put that dedication and resources to it, they'll they'll get their perfect choir
They'll
someday.
get the perfect choir, be perfect pitch.
Yes. Um, so we do have a question in, if you want me to throw it out
Sure,
there.
sure.
It says they're asking, how does a low-level employee with no control over the hiring process help with diversity?
So, and I actually hear that's a good question. And thank you, whoever asked the question, because I hear that a lot. It's like, well, I don't have a voice. How can I? But it's not just the hiring, it's making the organization aware. As I mentioned earlier, the ERG groups are those ones that hold the organization accountable for hiring. If you sit back and you say, well, we've hired in the last year, and you have percentages, because this should not be a secret to employees, right? It should be a very
Right.
transparent thing. And you bring that to the attention of your HR team and your leadership team. That's how your voice is heard. You should be able to communicate and freely share, why you feel like there's not, a diversity outlook, even though the company might say they're looking for diverse candidates. And if you're in an organization that you feel like you can't share, that's a whole different conversation. But it should definitely be, use your voice, whether it's through an ERG group, whether it's through just general conversation. There should be no employee, regardless of the level or level of responsibility, that cannot hold their organization accountable, especially when the organization is, committed to diversity, equity, inclusion.
Gotcha. Thank you. So what tactics have you employed to address diversity challenges in the workplace?
So, and you'll probably hear me say this through our conversation, Marissa, it's all about intention. And what we've been working on, since my time at OVG and even prior to that, is that we look at how, starting from attracting and recruiting people into the organization, how do we do that? And yeah, it could be very simple. You post a job, you get who you get, and you hope it all works out. But that's not intention. You do post the job, you do the normal recruiting functions, but we partner with HBCUs, we partner with professional organizations that are diverse organizations, to look for roles, whether it's an intern, any role in the organization. We let them know. We post it in very defined locations that will have a more set of eyes on it that come from diverse potential candidates. So we do it with intention. We're very active in that, where we're developing all of those relationships. I right now have been saying like HBCUs and professional organizations, but it also includes whether it's somebody with a disability or different political aspirations, all of the different things. We try and really cast a wide net and then move it in. Our industry is definitely an industry that's focused on relationships. And it happens, when you're hiring somebody, it's a natural thing to kind of reach out to your network of people and go, we're hiring for whatever it might be. And they tend to bring in the same type of people where, I went to whatever university and I'm going to reach out to my university contacts. And although that's great, and there's probably very qualified candidates at these within my network, I don't know that it's going to help me in my diversity when I'm trying to get a diversity of thought perspective.
Right.
Because we all might kind of have similar. So we focus on that as well. We get the relationships, that's great, but we also want to build beyond the relationships. And then internally, as we look at projects and as for HR, as we're doing initiatives, we make sure that we have that support from the employees. We ask those questions, whether it's sending out a survey, or having a webinar on something, so that we can hear all the different voices and help them to be part of how we build things. So I think communication and how you reach out and attract helps with the challenges of getting a diverse workplace and in a diverse environment.
Great. So what do you think are the more common mistakes an organization's approach or thinking about diversity? What are some common mistakes that companies make when trying to build this?
I think some of the mistakes are a narrow vision of diversity. I think that diversity is so many things, and people just want to limit it to that visible diversity, right? So it's gender, it's ethnicity, you know, it's all of the things that you can kind of physically see. I think you need to understand it's how, you know, a person originally from the West Coast versus a person from like the Northeast. There's different mindset. I say that because I'm from the Northeast, moving to the West Coast. So I'm like, there's a different mindset. So, you know, but those gaps in the team. Yeah. And I also see, and this one probably hits me really hard. I see, you know, sometimes I'll see hiring managers or leaders say, I want a diverse candidate for this role. And, you know, but I got to get it filled immediately. And so they go into their, you know, their network or whatever, and they'll choose, we'll just say they'll choose a woman that might not be totally qualified for the role, and they know it. But they're like, yeah, but it's a diverse candidate. I feel good. I'm like, and then 6 months down the line, you know, it's like she's not working out, or the employee's like, I don't want to be here anymore because you were hired for a role that you weren't qualified for, or it was a stretch role, and that's fine, but you weren't given the support to be successful in the role. So, you know, I see a lot of times leaders will take the, I want to have diversity, but they won't take the time to make sure that they also tie it to success for the role. You know, and that is something that we've been working through and having conversations with leaders, you know, at OVG now, where it's like, but make sure we get the right, we're going to give you a large swath of candidates that are also qualified for the role. And then we're going to pick the right one that we think will be the right fit for the role. And more times than not, it makes diversity so easy because you've taken that time to do it. But we also, you know, kind of set expectations and let them know that does not mean you're going to get the person tomorrow, because it's going to take the time it's going to take. We have to reach out to areas that we might have not have reached out to before. And, you know, and we're working on our branding for an employee. You know, what does it look like to work at OVG? And we, you know, by doing that, we're going to attract more people too, because they'll understand what it looks like to be an employee here, and they can fit in as, you know, as a diverse candidate. So that's probably a common mistake, where it's a patience thing. And I'm like, do it with intention. It'll take the time it takes, and you'll be happy in the end.
There was the Kings, I thought, did a really good job with their diversity and showing people like, this is what it looks like working for us. And I mean, they spotlighted all their employees from, I mean, LGBTQ to Black, white, I mean, everything. So I loved watching those videos because it just showed like, if you want to work for us, this is who we are. This is what we do. So I thought it was a really cool way to engage with potential candidates and employees. So I thought it was cool.
And that's what we're looking to do. So we have, you know, we're working with our marketing team on that as well, to have those type of videos of our employees, you know, so that when someone goes on our landing page for careers, they'll get a kind of an experience, whether it's an employee sitting like we are having a conversation about working there, or what they do, or, you know, whatever keeps them engaged and happy to be at OVG. And so when the candidates will get that excitement. I don't know that we necessarily have that right now. Again, going back to a relationship-driven industry and organization, but that's what we're working towards, you know, so that we can definitely have similar. I'm going to have to go on and look at the Kings. I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
And just, you know, because I think that's great. And I think it's great for employees.
Yeah. They're a few years old. I'll send them over to you. They're really good videos.
I think that would be great.
This kind of dovetails into it a little bit, but how do you respond to someone that says, just hire the best person for the job? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like, you know, you kind of like put that Band-Aid on it. We just hire the best person, just go. Like, how do you combat that? What do you say to them? You
know, it kind of goes back to the previous question as well about how do you convince your colleagues that it's important. The same thing with, you know, I want the best person for the job, which my first response is always, of course we do. Like, so do I. You know, especially from an HR perspective, why wouldn't I want to hire someone that I think is going to be successful? Because if they're not, I'm going to have to, you know, have conversations that, you know, although are part of the HR world, aren't my favorite part of the HR world, you know. So I always tell them, I'm like, listen, we're always going to look for the, you know, the best person for the job, but we're going to look in a wide array of locations, and we're going to broaden our focus as we do it. And all we're going to ask you is be patient, you know. And yes, work is still going, and there's a lot going on. We're all very busy, and everything is time crunch, and we're going to do it as quickly as possible. But we're going to make sure that we have, you know, we have a slate that represents the community we work in, that we're a part of, you know, the diversity that we're looking for. And as we develop these relationships with the different organizations and the different universities, it'll be easier each time to do that because we now have those relationships. So we can then dig into that relationship and go, we've got this opening, you know, do you have any candidates? Here's the scope of the job. So as we build those relationships, we will be able to align with the expectations of the hiring manager on, like, I want the best person for the job and I want them tomorrow.
Right.
You know, but right now, our answer is it's going to take time, but you're going to get the best person for the job. We will never hire somebody just to hire them. We're always going to look for the best person.
You never want to hire someone that you know is going to fail, or like you said before, they may need a little training and coaching, but they need those resources and support to get them to where they need to go. So it's always.
And we also want to push for, have you looked internally? One of my first questions whenever there's an open position, I always ask hiring managers, like, so do we have an internal candidate, you know, that you think is ready for this role, you know? And maybe they're not going to step in and run, but we know they have that potential because, you know, you already know that person's, you know, their work ethic, you know, their history, you know, from a professional perspective. So that's a plus. And that only adds to the culture of an organization if they know that they can grow in that organization. So, you know, I always ask that question. I always, you know, look at their team and go, okay, what about Ann? She's been here. Is she ready? And if she's not ready, what are we doing to help her so that the next time a role like this becomes available, she is ready? Because it shouldn't be she's not next. It should definitely like, okay, but let's put her on a plan, you know, development plan to get her ready for the next time and have that conversation with her. Because, you know, I've seen so many times where a position opens, we have a candidate, it could be a diverse candidate or not, and they're not considered for that promotion. We bring someone from the outside, and that's just a culture killer right there, because they're like, I don't even have an option. And then they're asked to kind of train them, as they say, I don't have the option, you know. So I'm like, let's work on having that conversation with Ann and go, you know, we're going to set you up with some different trainings, different, you know, skill building things so that the next time this opportunity comes, right now, you're not there, but we're aiming you to get there. So at least they feel like there's a value and engagement with the organization on them. And we're not just looking at them saying, we just need you to work and we're hiring somebody else. So.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I know we have that same mentality. It's like we hire within first. Like, let's go down in our candidate. They know the culture, they know the company, they know what's expected of them and how we're moving forward together. So that's the first place we try to go to.
Yes.
So let's take a minute to talk about the hiring process. I mean, one of the biggest steps in diversifying and creating that inclusive environment is you want to remove bias from the process of hiring. So seeing as people struggle with 3 different types, you have your conscious, your unconscious, and your confirmation, it can be very difficult for this process. So what are some steps people can take to eliminate the bias from a hiring process?
Yeah. So, you know, I would say the first step, it's funny, you know, we always say words matter, but do we really understand what that means, right? So when you're doing a job description, look at your job description and see, is that kind of leaning towards attracting more males or attracting more females or whatever, you know, different words, collaborate, support, tend to be words that are more associated with a female, you know, with a woman, whereas analyze, determine, those tend to be more associated with a male. So look at your job description and see, are you not consciously aiming this job to where you're going to get more men applying for the role? And that even would go to a title, right? You know, those different things. So I would say start there and go, does this make sense? And let's go from there. And then make sure that you are using several sources to attract those candidates. And then that'll allow you to build a nice slate across. And then you can truly get to that point where you can hire the best fit for the role, rather than having such a narrow focus where it allows for that bias to come in, whether conscious or not conscious. You know, so it really does start from the very beginning, the postings, on up to who's gonna be presented in front of me for me to make a decision. You know, I years ago they did a study where they had, you know, the exact same resume, changed the names, and saw how people were not doing what they should be doing. So, you know, ideally to me, I'm like, take the names off completely. Let's just go with the thing. But since we really can't do that, it's one of those where, no, present a nice slate and be able to allow them to make those conversations. And I always tell my recruiters, and Like when you're sitting with the hiring manager and they're determining who they want to interview, ask those questions. Like, so what about this one and this? What's the difference between these two? Especially because that unconscious bias might get you with the name. So especially those that might have those ethnic names, I guess you would call it. I don't even know if that you would call it that, but and the resumes are very similar. I tell my recruiters, I'm like, ask them, so what's the difference? Like, why this one over this one? Like, I need to dig in, really get them to think about it. So, you know, because sometimes it really could be conscious, and that's a whole different conversation, but you know, sometimes they don't even realize it. So it's like, dig in. Let's, you know, as recruiters and talent acquisition professionals, I'm always like, we're not just there to go, here's a resume, it's really have those conversations, help the hiring managers understand what they're looking for, and also help them to, you know, focus on diversity. It's going to only be a plus for them, you know. So that's kind of where I think we can go with that.
Okay. And I'm in doing some research. There's even software now that you can put in resumes and they make it a blind process for you. So
yep, and that software is great, you know, because it does make it a blind process. And that, you know, you can take your job description, you know, feed it in, and they can point out all the different words that are like, this is slanting a little towards this, or this is kind of eliminating that, and that's great, because as you get that, you'll start to naturally be able to, you know, to draft those postings and job descriptions in a more open and inclusive way, rather than that closed way that we've done for so long. So.
Very true. So now, once you know we've hired our people, we have them on board. They're working hard every day. How do you keep that sense of inclusion in front of mind? Can you provide some examples of what you do, either on a daily basis or just to keep them front of mind and included?
You know, I look at it this way. I'm very much into communication, right? So I have, you know, we're developing for OVG we're trying to get an intranet together, but that internal communication flow, and for me personally, I like it, whereas I don't want just to push information out. I'm sure you've seen Marissa, I'm always sending emails out for different things because I like to stay aware. And fortunately, my team is very good at making me aware of stuff that I might have missed. So information out, but we want to also have a channel with information in, which is our ERGs are going to, you know, be critical in that, so that, you know, we're really, it's a synergy back and forth for all, you know, for me in my role as HR lead, and for the whole team, so that we can make sure that we understand what employees are feeling, and have action where it's appropriate. You know, I'm not going to always assume that I know what all of the employees are feeling, because I don't, you know. So I'm really strong on communication. And from an equity perspective, when we're doing initiatives and we're, you know, doing programs and policies, we're always looking to make sure that our intent and reality align, so that we're not, you know, setting up things that we're like, didn't realize that would make someone feel a little more marginalized, you know. So we're really just very, you know, very, very focused on that. And we do that again with feedback. We're not going to sit there and in a bubble. There's certain things that, yes, as an HR professional, we need to do, you know, but we don't want to do this in a bubble. We're really a team here. We want to be, you know, I've talked to employees and I'm like, HR is transparent. You have any questions? Ask us. We're not doing anything behind closed doors hidden. You know, we really are trying to build a nice, strong culture. And in previous jobs, I've always felt the same way. And, you know, there's been differences where some organizations were less transparent, but I think with Oakview Group, we truly are a family. We're very, you know, we all want the success of each other. We might not be hitting all of the goals that we're looking for yet, but we're definitely striving to get there. Yeah. Well,
I mean, and you guys have done such a great job, you know, talking about getting the input from the employees, like all the way back to when you sent out a survey to ask people how comfortable they felt coming back into the office coming out of COVID. I mean, a lot of companies could have been like, nope, this is what we're doing. Here's the process. This is when you're coming back in. But, you know, you guys have done a good job to get that feedback back, get that buy-in from them to make people feel comfortable and have that decision whether they want to come back in or not. I mean, that's just one step in having that open communication and providing that safe environment for people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would hate to work for an organization, and fortunately I haven't, that makes you feel not comfortable to express your concerns and views. it just
Yeah.
just express them, and you have some organizations that'll say, you can say whatever you want without fear of reprisal, but people are like, yeah, no, there'll be some consequences,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm truly one of those where it's like, no, you should truly understand that your input is what's going to make our culture what it is, and it's going to keep everybody engaged, and that doesn't mean that everything employees want we can do, but it definitely means we heard you, and we'll
Correct.
see where we can go with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to your comment about how you send out emails, I love the emails that you send. So like Memorial Day, it's not only just like, hey, go celebrate Memorial Day, but you're giving us insight of why it's important. And then here are some things that you can do to celebrate it besides the family cookout. I mean, you
Yeah.
sent us the one
Yeah.
recently about Juneteenth. Like, here's what
Yeah.
you can go do, enjoy the day off, but this is why it's important. This is why you
Yeah.
should focus on it. And I look forward to those. I mean,
Yeah.
Paul
Good.
B, who leads our DEI committee for EAMCs, did that in February. All month of February, we got
Yeah.
Black History Fact of Month. And I loved it. I
Yes.
sit there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, you're just continuing to help educate people on things they may not know or have the time to look up or didn't even know they needed to know. But it's, it's nice to get those.
Thank you
And
so much for that. And that's exactly right. It's all about education. It's that you don't know what you don't know,
right.
so you share things. And as we are building and trying to get more, we're always looking to go, we're not trying to be heavy handed. We're just trying to educate and share. And people
Yep.
are going to take from it what works for them,
Yep.
and give options and opportunities, because I know every day I'm learning and growing. So I'm like, we're going to share this information with you. And I'm
Yeah.
glad it's being received well. That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Marissa.
And it's it's something little that can be done, that it doesn't take a lot of energy. It doesn't take any money to do it. It's just a little bit of research and 10
Yeah.
minutes of an email. So I thank you
That's
for
it.
those.
That's
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Um, so what are some other tools and resources that you can suggest to help a team diversify with their diversity strategy?
So, in the time that we're in now, there's a lot of DEI consultancies and firms that are, helping organizations. And I think for an organization that's coming, like OVG, we're at the start of our DEI journey. Reach out to them. It could be a consultant to help you one day with training, or it can be one to do the whole strategy. I think that makes a difference, because your foundation is what's going to get it for you, right? So if you don't get yourself a solid foundation that can help you build that strong strategy and set out those achievable goals, and it's kind of wishy-washy, I guess I'll use that word, your team is not going to buy into that. The leaders are not going to buy into that. So, you're going to have that, we're DEI and we're focused on diversity, but if there's no actions behind it and there's no things in place, people are going to be like, that's just a word. That means nothing. This company is not, is not walking that walk, or whatever, walking
Right.
that talk, I guess is what they say. So I would say, if you can, because it's easy to say, well, everybody knows what that means. No, everyone doesn't know what that means. So, there are subject matter experts that can really help you. So use them. They're great. I know that for OVG, we're using a consultant to get us a nice solid foundation so that we can build all our stuff off of that, because there's no reason not to use the experts when you can. So that would be my recommendation. And, you might actually find experts within your organization. It doesn't always necessarily need to be external, but that's always a good thing, especially if you're at the start of your journey.
Well, and we've talked a lot about how we're growing as a company, and we're very fortunate. We have you, we have a team, we have Tim, leading the charge and wanting this for all of us. But what advice do you have for those venues and organizations that don't have an HR department, or you, or a large staff, or they just work with limited resources? What can they do to start their journey?
So it's funny. I sit there. My first thought would be, get an HR person.
100%. Coming from someone that's been fielding that role for the last year and a half, I'm all for an HR person.
Yeah. So, and I kind of go back to, and maybe the pandemic did this, or and even prior to that, there's so many people that have branched out on their own that can offer assistance, and also use them. And, they'll work with you based on your budget, right? So it's not necessarily having an HR person, if that doesn't fit in the organization's budget. The organization is very small, having one that's full-time, but have that person that you can reach out to make sure that that policies are in place the way they need to be, and that if there's employee concerns or whether it's comp or whatever, use that person that has that expertise. A lot of times, and I know, Marissa, you can attest to this because you've been carrying several roles for yourself. We lean on people that we know can handle that skill within the organization to do it. And that's perfectly fine. And that's what needs to be done. That's great that you have that internal, but it's also to be a little bit of a burden to that person to also have to do the HR part of it. When you have people that can do that because that's their skill. So I would say if you can get at least an HR person, a generalist to, handle all this stuff, but if not, have that relationship with a consultant that you can, tap into as you need to, whether it's roll out an initiative for you or help. There's so many different things, different aspects of it. You can get that benefit specialist if that's what you need, that you can tap into the recruiting teams, the search firms that aren't your full on executive search firm. They're your daily day-to-day search firms, but they get you that, that skilled person that you need with diversity in mind. Of course, you can get your comp team. So I would say don't be afraid for the small organizations or the ones with limited resources. Don't be afraid to ask for that help, because in the long run it's going to help your organization. HR is there to help you achieve the goals and to beyond the compliance aspect of things, to make sure that you don't get into any regulatory issues. They're here to help you reach your goals. So, kind of tap into those experts as you need them, whether it's in-house or you get somebody that you have a relationship externally. In the long run, it's going to help your organization. And when you're growing, definitely tap into HR, because they're going to help you. I say that as I begin my OVG journey. I'm like, oh yeah, we're growing and we need to get this team going. So
oh yeah, growing quickly, which is a good problem to have, good place to be.
Yep.
So
yep.
So what's your biggest piece of advice to a company, to a person, that they should take away before they start their strategy?
Yeah, I would say I would say do your research so you know what you're getting into when you want to commit to DEI or commit to an HR team or whatever it might be. Do your research so you don't do it because it's the thing to do these days. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Right. So tap into that, do your research, and then go find those experts that can help you. And don't leave out your employees on the whole journey. This should not be something that you drop in and go, here you go, bam. It should definitely be very collaborative so that everybody in the organization is committed to it and feels an ownership of DE&I, because that's the way it's going to be successful. It's going to be natural. And be patient. It takes time. It takes time. We're not going to suddenly, snap our hands and suddenly we have a complete, beautiful, diverse work environment and everything. No, it's those little steps, but be open to the little steps. Yep. Yeah, it would be great, but be open to that and be patient with that and communicate that, because you might be patient, but your stakeholders are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And be communicative so they understand that stuff is happening, but it's going to take the time that it's going to have. And you'll see the richness in your organization when you open it up, from a diverse perspective and an inclusion and an equity. It'll be enjoyable to have these colleagues. It'll be enjoyable to be part of this organization. It's not going to take away the fact that you're working really hard. It's not going to, all of that's happening.
Especially in this industry.
Yeah, exactly. But it'll just add to it'll add to the enjoyment. We want to, someone always asks me, it's like, well, what gets you out of bed every day? Because every day we make that choice. Are we going to continue on with work or not? And it's like, I enjoy who I work with. I enjoy what I do. It's a lot of work. When the day ends, I'm exhausted and I haven't really gotten too far into my to-do list because I've added a whole bunch of things on. But what we're doing is real good work. And, for me to come into OVG, an organization that didn't have a formal HR team and build it, HR function, and build it, as I tell Ernest and Deneen on my team, I'm like, this is an opportunity that we don't generally get. We normally will go in and make changes, but we're building this. It's like we're leaving something here at some point in the future. When we leave, someone else will come in, they'll build more, and that's great.
You better not leave.
We're not going anywhere.
You're not going anywhere
anytime soon. No, we're definitely not. But it's such a great opportunity, and that's what we enjoy every day. our to-do list never gets shorter, but it's an enjoyment, and working with everybody is great. Because all of you, Marissa, I got to tell you, you and everybody, it's just been so welcoming to the HR function, which makes it so much easier.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We are open armed, ready for you guys to come in and do what you need to do.
Yeah, we're doing it. We're working on it.
Awesome. And you guys are doing a fantastic job.
Right.
So we have a few more minutes and I have a few questions. So if you're ready,
Okay.
okay. So DEI is such a wide scope when looking at areas of improvement. Any tips for prioritizing what to address with the DEI committee outside of immediate areas of concern?
That's a great question, and it's hard, right? There's so many, and it's like, especially when you're doing it, you're like, well, this is important, this is important, this is important. I don't think it's a swath of this is what you should do first. I think you need to look at what your organization's needs are and where's your biggest pain point. If employees are feeling like you are not hiring, you're not hiring in a diverse way, then your pain point is you need to look at how you're doing your recruiting. If they feel like it's, no one feels included because maybe there's internal projects or whatever, focus on that. So you really have to look at where your pain points are with your organization within the DEI and make that your priority. You'll get to everything, but make that your priority.
Very,
I hope
very
that was
good.
helpful.
No, I think it's spot on. I think you're right. Because each organization is so different. You don't know what the pain point is. You don't know what your stakeholders' priorities are. So you have to kind of go through that and then figure out from there. So I think that's spot on. One other question we have is, from an organization that's outwardly diverse, but the decision makers are not as reflective of that, what is the best approach to do that? Say it without say it without become the exhausted go-to person. So they don't want to, how you said before, like the one person that you can kind of lean on. So how do you help that? How do you approach that without constantly being that go-to person?
Being that person, that's always the so I don't know if the organization has the employee resources group or what the channel is, if they have a diversity committee or whatever, but I would say talk to your peers and talk to your colleagues and saying the same thing. It's like, are we seeing this? And share. It's like, I don't want to be that only person in the room that speaks, but can we get a committee together so that we all can have a comfortable, safe space and have those conversations? Sometimes, depending on the size of your organization, you turn out to be that person, but recruit other people to be there with you, because it's a heavy load, and sometimes you don't want to always have to be that person. So recruit others, share what you see, and what the concerns are of the organization.
Perfect.
I hope
well, Anne, we are up on our time.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it. I know everyone else listening appreciates it. So thanks again. I look forward to continuing to work with you. I'm very excited to see where we go. So just thanks.
Well,
and have a safe trip from New York to California.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for asking me to do this. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the questions. They were great. And I wish everybody all the best in their DEI journey.
Thanks, Anne.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.